he raises from the dead, he goes and hangs out with his disciples, and his disciples are like, what? You're alive? That's amazing! I did not see that coming. High five, Jesus. Right? They're just like hanging out with Jesus, partying, shooting their guns in the air, and they're just having a great time. And so Jesus is like, hey, cool, I made some fish for you guys. Let's hang out. Let's talk. Anyway, I'm going to go back to heaven. And I want you guys to go into all the world and preach the gospel and just go tell everybody in the whole world. All right, see you. And he literally like goes up on a cloud up into heaven. And I'm sure the disciples are like, what? Jesus is always doing crazy things. That is amazing. I didn't see that coming either. And I bet about 5 minutes after the shock of that wore off, I bet one of them was like, what was that last thing that he said? We're supposed to do, what? There's only 11 of us now. We're supposed to go into all of the world and tell everyone about him. Okay, cars haven't been invented yet, and I've got a really bad pair of sandals, and I'm not sure how we're going to do that. How can us 11 guys do that? How can we do that? And I feel that way too. Like sometimes I think like our responsibility as Christians is to go into all of the world and feed everyone and tell everyone about Jesus and love them. It's like, I can't do that. I can't even love my neighbors. How am I supposed to do that? I think there is a hint as to how Jesus thinks we're supposed to do this. And it's not as awful as it sounds. It's not as daunting and huge as it sounds. But it's huge. Okay, we just don't know it. So that night before Jesus was crucified, he's having communion, right? It's the Passover dinner, and it's what we now call communion, and it's anyway. So we follow some of that stuff, right? Like the things that Jesus did that night, we still do those things in church. He broke the bread, and we break the bread, and he poured the wine. He said, this bread, this is my body broken for you. This wine, this is my blood shed for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And we do that in remembrance of him. We still do that. It's a big part of it. But there's another part of that night that I was like, man, I wish we still did that, because that was pretty cool, right? Before that little dinner, the disciples are hanging out, and this is when things are good, right? This is when they're like, you know what? We're kind of picking up some steam as a movement. People kind of think we're important. We're probably minutes away from taking over the world right now. Probably. And that's what they thought Jesus was going to do. Take over the world. Like as a military leader or as a political leader, that's how they viewed Jesus. And Jesus is listening to these guys argue about who's going to be their number 2 guy. And everyone's like, Jesus is obviously the important guy here, but I'm probably the second most awesome in this room. And everyone's like, well, I hear your point, but I'm actually the second most awesome if you think about it, because I'm in charge of the money or whatever. They're just arguing about this stuff, right? And Jesus doesn't say anything. He's not like, you guys, I am so disappointed in you. Shame on you. Like, there's none of that. He just stands up and he takes off his robe and he goes and wraps a towel around his waist and he starts washing their feet. And Peter's like, whoa, no, don't do that. And Jesus is like, I'm in charge, right? You just said I was in charge. So I'm going to do this. And it was just silent, man. It's just like gross and creepy. And Jesus washes their feet. And he goes and he sits down. And Peter's like, well, wash all of me. And Jesus is like, will you just let me do what I'm trying to do? I'm in charge here. And he washes his feet. And he puts his robe back on. And he sits back down. And I bet they were just like, what just happened to my feet? What is going on? Right? And this is what Jesus says about it. Let's read this here. This is John 13:12. So, when he'd washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, you know what I've done to you? And you call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you. Okay, we'll come back to that one in a minute. Okay. So Jesus is like, you call me teacher, you call me Lord, which is like the highest title you can give someone, right? And he's like, you're right, I am, you're right. So if I did this to you, you should do this for each other. So, here's the plan. when we get done here in about an hour or 30 minutes, whenever we get out of here, we're all going to get in a bus together. We're going to go down to the mall. We're going to start tackling people and ripping their shoes off and washing their feet. Who's in? Yeah! Yes! And then when we go to jail, we'll be on the news. And then it's going to... No. Is that what we're supposed to do? I mean, what does Jesus mean when he's like, okay, I did this for you, go do it? What does he mean by that? I mean, is that what we're supposed to... We don't do that in church, do we? Which would be cool, but we don't. I was wondering, what did Jesus mean by that? What does he want us to do here? Why did he do this? And I started doing some research on this, and here's what's going on here. You see, in Jesus' time, washing your feet was more important than washing your hands. Because they had either no shoes or just little straps of leather on the bottom of their feet, just like sandals, really. And they would walk around in these city streets that were filled with rocks and dirt and horse poop and probably people poop, and they would get cuts and wounds on their feet. And if those got infected, and they would get infected, they would die. They didn't have modern medicine the way we do. So washing your feet was a very, very important job. And also, it was a disgusting job. It was disgusting. In fact, it was so gross, and it was looked down on so much that people had slaves, but it was too gross of a job for the slaves. So actually, the slaves had their own slaves, and those were the slaves that washed people's feet. And so while those disciples are sitting around arguing about who's the most important, who's the number 2 guy, Jesus does the job of a slave's slave. And he's like, that's what I'm doing for you. Because it's important, and it needs to be done, and it seems like it's nothing. It's not a cool job. It's not like the interesting job that we're going to write about in the paper, right? No one's going to cover this one, but it needs to be done. And I'm going to do it. And if you're going to follow me, then you need to be willing to do it. I used to be involved, when I lived in Minneapolis, I was involved with this church called the Salvage Yard. It was like an outreach to punks and street kids, and there were some crazy people involved in that were really living on the edge people. And they found out about this thing called the Rainbow Gathering. Have you guys ever heard of the Rainbow Gathering? Anybody? Every year in a different national forest, 40,000 hippies descend on a forest and have hippie-thon. It's like hippie fest every year. And they do hippie stuff, and they bang on drums, and a lot of them run around naked, and it's not as interesting as it sounds, because a lot of them are old hippies from the 60s. And so it's just really, it's a weird subculture of all these people, and it's a lot of street kids and homeless kids, and there's a train hopping subculture of runaway kids that ride trains all over the country. And all of these just weird hodgepodge of people. There's Hare Krishna and all these religions, and just everybody just in this national forest. 40,000 people every year. So these guys from our church found out about it, and they found out that people show up to this thing with no tents or no blankets or no shoes or no food, and they're just whatever, man, woo, right? And so they're we could go and help. So they would go and set up a little food station. They called it the Jesus Kitchen, and they'd start feeding people. And it was a really cool thing. They'd have these crazy conversations with people. It was awesome. But then they found out that somebody just did it for fun. They were it would be kind of a cool symbol if we set up a foot washing station. And so I went for a couple of years, and I sort of saw the foot washing station. And I was I am not doing that. I will cut down wood. I will build fires. I will make food. I will, talk to people. I don't really want to do the foot washing station. Well, one year, we went to the Rainbow Gathering, and it was in the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. You guys know what that is? So here's real Michigan, and then there's that part of Wisconsin that they didn't want, so they gave it to Michigan, right? The Upper Peninsula there. It's beautiful up there, but it's rough. It's rough. And one year, the Rainbow Gathering was up there, and it had rained and rained and rained and rained and rained. And the ground, the dirt was clay. And so it wasn't normal mud, it was clay mud. And what was happening was people would show up to the Rainbow Gathering with no shoes, especially the train hopping kids. And the ground was so soft they would sink all the way up to their knees. And their feet would get so low, it would get to the root level. And their feet would get all puckered and pruny like after a bath, right? And they would just get shredded on these roots, just like cut to pieces. And kids were getting like helicoptered out of there to go to the hospital. It was serious. And so for some reason that year, God is like, Wes, go do the foot washing station. And I was like, la 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 la. But that doesn't work with God. So I end up at the foot washing station, and I didn't want to be there. Didn't want to be there. And this kid comes in, and he's clearly like one of the train hopping kids. Like you can just kind of spot him, right? And he had no shoes. He literally did not own any shoes. And he sits down, and we're just like in silence. And the thing is, it was like super clear to both of us that neither one of us wanted to be there. And it was also super clear that it was really important for this guy, not just as some symbolic spiritual thing, but for his physical health and livelihood. This kid needed his feet washed. So I started washing his feet. And we both just started crying. We literally weren't saying anything. We're both just crying. And I don't know why, except for that it was this holy thing, that God showed up in this thing that neither one of us wanted to be there, but both of us knew we needed to be doing this. That kid did not want to humble himself to be served like that. And I didn't want to humble myself to touch some nasty feet. But God was like, this is what needs to be done. And we did it. I was just crying, right? And I remembered I had some shoes. Like I bought a pair, I knew it was going to be muddy, so I bought a pair of shoes at Payless, and they were like on sale. I think I paid $7 for these shoes. And I got them specifically to bring them to the Rainbow Gathering and trash them and throw them away. And I went and grabbed a couple pairs of socks, and I grabbed these shoes, and I gave them to this kid. And he was just like, bawling, just bawling. Thank you. And it was this holy moment. And it was important. And I feel like maybe what God is hinting at, it occurred to me for the first time that maybe what Jesus is saying to us is, you want something big and important to do? I have something huge for you to do it. You're just not going to think it's very big. You won't think it's big, but I do. Are you willing to do that? I love the story that Agape was telling about the biscuits, man. I love that. It's so awesome. That is exactly what it is. Like, are we willing to hand out those little biscuits, even though it doesn't seem important to us? It's huge, right? We're looking for that big thing. Where's the big thing for God? I'm willing to do it. And God's like, you want something big? I have it. I want you to love your brother. And you're like, oh no, my brother's a moron. But I want to go to some faraway country and be a martyr for you. Well, maybe, but what I really want you to do is sit next to that weird kid who smells bad. No, but I want to be a famous rock star so that I can win awards, and then when I win the award, I can say, I would like to thank God, and that would be so good for you, God. Think about how the publicity you'll get for me winning those awards. And God's like, I don't care about that at all. Okay, but are you willing to do this one little tiny thing? This one little thing? You see what happens when we start doing those little things is that big thing that we want, God starts laying that out in front of us. And you know what? It's not necessarily the big thing that we want. It's the big thing that God wants. It's the big thing that we could never imagine. Our little brains would never imagine. Some friends in this same crazy church, this punk church in Minneapolis, they just basically were like, well, who are our neighbors? And this is a while back, but in Minneapolis, there was this tall bike scene. It was like these punks that were kind of mean that rode tall bikes. You know what tall bikes are? It's like they take bikes apart and they spot weld them and they make giant bikes and then they ride them down the street. And these kids who wear leather jackets and have knives and have the thingies, the mohawks. I almost said mullets. And they would basically it was sort of that attitude of they're riding this big huge bike so that you look at them so that they can go, what are you looking at? So you can go, you're on a tall bike. That's what you wanted, right? And these guys would get into fights. They were raging alcoholics. There was this is so weird, but there was a gang of tall bike kids called the Black Label. So my friends, they were just we should do that too, because, we should just hang out with our neighbors and hang out with them and talk to them. And let's. And I like bikes and I like doing that kind of stuff.
So they started spot welding their own bikes,